Alright, time for some more Illogic. Last time we went over a week 5 match against Samantha and her Wooper Boopers. Please go check out that video first if you have not done so already, as we went over the team builder and battle in which, spoiler alert, the Bouffalant clutched out a close 2-0 win thanks to, frankly, the whole team. Highlighted, I suppose, by Iron Hands firing off so many attacks, Empoleon with 3 KOs, Cinderace pivoting around consistently and constantly, and the cleanup from Yanmega, all contributing to us being the first team to bring down the Boopers all season. That brings our record up to 3-2 with a +7 differential, good for a top 8 spot in the league and a playoff spot. But as I have emphasized already, our schedule does not let up the rest of the way. This week, we're going to be going over our Week 6 match against a very familiar opponent in SteveChuck and his 3-2 Waterdeep Wobbuffets. Timestamps are in the description. As should be obvious by now, SteveChuck is a great friend of mine who we find ourselves facing off against way too often in this league, as a result of both of us having excellent results, me being the perpetual 1 seed until the Noctiles inevitably unseat me, and Steve securely in the 3 seed. We've gone over so many great matches of ours already on the channel. My first WCL draft loss, to incredibly close matches in the low tier league in Season 12, to my insane throw in Season 8. But there have been, of course, plenty of others. Aside from defeating him and Michael in the Season 9 semis, we also faced off 4 times in the last 2 seasons. In Season 13's auction season, we had a crazy close match in the regular season. My Slowking clutching it out against his Galarian Slowking with help from Covert Cloak, plus the Hisuian Arcanine putting in the finest work offensively, and good predictions from the Hisuian Arcanine and Wo-Chen and Rotom-Fan among others. The favor, though, was returned in the finals in an absolutely bizarre match. In the first 5 turns, I got back Scalber in with Snow, behind a substitute, and a +1/+1 from a D-Dance. Looking at his team, that's easily game. But for the Svolky Scarf Armarouche, who clicked Destiny Bond and got the double knockout, another D-Dance would have just been game. Followed that up at the very next turn, Sandy Shock's Volt Switch procs weakness policy on Zapdos Galar, who agilities up and sweeps, living the Hisuian Arcanine E-Speed 2. No band on Hisuian Arcanine, no Sand from Hippo, no Helmet, which I'd famously proclaimed my love for all season. Any of those could have kept me in the game or just won it, but alas, Steve somehow calls this and sweeps with the Gyarados. Worry not, we got to play again in our very next match. Season 14's doubles, Week 1, in which we overwhelmed Steve with a nice offense once we all learned together that Hoopa Unbound's Hyperspace Fury bypasses a Shed Tail substitute. Smooth sailing from there, all the way until the finals where we met yet again, back-to-back for both of us. Turn 1, Skyman flinching Rillaboom was huge to stop the Grass Pledge, Water Pledge shenanigans, and then our offense was very good against everything but the Terra Fairy Heatran. And then Scarf, Hoopa Unbound, Zen Headbutt lets me down, missing Sneasler on an absolutely crucial turn, and it looks over as I have to Terra Poison the Gyarados. But then Steve gets scared of Terra Blast from Gyarados as I instead target down the Sneasler, both wasting time with Endure Sneasler and Protect Heatran, letting +1/+1 Gyarados stay in long enough to Oko Latios with Crunch and giving me the Season 14 crown. You can find a more in-depth breakdown on that one in particular on the main WCL channel, and as fun as it's been to go down the memory lane, it's go time for Season 15's iteration of our rivalry. This time, Steve had a tough start, including maybe being hacked out of a win Week 1. Couldn't be us, but with 3 wins in a row coming into this match, he's looking fierce. It starts with his first round pick, Chien-Pao, followed by Iron Moth, Landorus Incarnate without Sheer Force, Frogadier, Pecharunt, Necrozma, Blastoise, Hisuian Zorua, Hisuian Decidueye, Electros, and Berserker, with Frogadier, Decidueye, and the final round pick, Necrozma, as the Terra captains. We've seen quite a bit this season. Those top tier mons are incredible threats by themselves, so it may be just about picking out the lower tiers that come to support the big boys, who we'll get into in a little bit. But obviously, first we have to mention the Hisuian Zorua, who is a funny check to Iron Hands with the fighting immunity plus Willow, but really doesn't do anything else here. Berserker is not it either. The steel typing and low speed does not help basically at all, falling prey to basically anything but Kamala and Untered Yanmega. Frogadier has a little use thanks to its speed and Protean U-turn, plus the Water Stab with its speed could do something, but I don't think it'd actually dare bring that to this match. Hisuian Decidueye has some use here, actually. Not sure about which Terra typing would be best, but maybe something like Water to help against the Fire types could be intriguing while retaining the Fighting Stab for, say, Empoleon, but come on, you really think he's going to Terra this over Necrozma? The final slot for me actually comes down to a couple different mons. My heart says he brings Pecharunt, but my mind says the eel is coming. Pecharunt is, of course, amazing as a physical wall, specifically for Cinderace and Iron Hands, while it's beating Rotom-Mow and crushing that, plus Appleton. But in exchange, Latios and Typhlosion outspeed and hit it super effectively with special stabs, and both Empoleon and Bisharp hard counter it with the poison immunity, plus competitive and defiant, plus Bisharp further resisting Shadow Ball, so it could be an interesting play around if it does end up coming. Otherwise, Electros looks intriguing with an Assault Vest, taking less than half from things like Latios, Draco, and Typhlosion's Eruption, while swapping around into his big threats with Volt Switch, or just breaking things down with coverage like Crunch. It's a bit of a threat. Similarly, Blastoise can wall up decently against my non-electrics, rapid spinning and flip turning around, or my pick, which is the Shell Smash set. At +2, it outspeeds everything and hits with +2 Water, Ice, and Fighting coverage is devastating. But otherwise, man, those top 4 are just incredible. Iron Moth is something I have faced off against so much, but despite all the flaws it has, it doesn't get easier to predict or deal with. The speed is a little awkward with Latios, but it outspeeds all but Cinderace, has the very strong fire and poison typing, especially against my new grass types, and surprising special bulk. This could be tough to maneuver around. Speaking of, I'm so ready to find out how I'm losing to Necrozma, but I think I'm most afraid of Dragon Dance. The Terra could be... A Fairy comes to mind, maybe Ice to pair with Earthquake, Water because it's so solid neutrally. Not sure how we're walling it or breaking through it, so that'll be fun. Speaking of, Chien-Pao, disgusting. Only a couple ways we're possibly dealing with that, not much aside from the obvious, and if it's that obvious, then Steve's know what we can do, and if he knows... So anyways, Landorus. With EQ, physical or special, maybe Scarfed, setup, the coverage, yuck. Even without sheer force, yuck. So for me... actually, I think everything has a pretty nice spot on the team. Even Kolmala, who is not coming, is neat as a possible immunity to poison if T-Spikes are an option, with lots of coverage for things like Iron Moth or Landorus. However, the Petrarunt is otherwise a hard stop, as I'm not breaking through that. Chien-Pao doesn't care about my bulk and wants that opportunity to fire off attacks, and I don't actually have bulk for anything really, so no Komala. Gligar is cute as an immunity to Petrarunt, and knockoff plus U-turn is obviously valuable, but the special bulk is not there. Ice moves from Chien-Pao KO anyways, and we're not doing much otherwise. There are better pieces. That includes Bisharp, who is another cute Petrarunt answer, plus looks overall good against Necrozma, not that we know for sure what it's doing or its Terra typing, but man, even with Eviolite being outsped by Chien-Pao, Iron Moth, and Landorus while being hit super effectively by very common moves on all of them is not a good look. Maybe if we could catch them in a choice lock, we could take advantage, but I'm not convinced we're strong enough that we can for sure take advantage of it, or not just get revenge easily. Maybe we'll play around with that later, though. That leaves me to pick at least one of my Terramons, and once again, leading up to the match, I assumed I'd be picking Appleton, but then I saw some banded calcs from Chien-Pao, and we're not actually an answer even with Terra Fairy and Thick Fat. Iron Moth is a great answer otherwise too, aside from EQ. Landorus can run a Sludge Wave and ruin my walling capabilities. I'm inviting in Petrarunt basically no matter what, and a bulky Necrozma may not care much about what I have for it, so no Apple quite yet. Finally, I once again really did like Yanmega, this time with Terra Water to hit Iron Moth and Landorus while resisting Ice Shard from Chien-Pao, but I couldn't pull the trigger on it quite yet. However impressive those calcs may have been, Blastoise and Petrarunt plus AV Eel and full health Iron Moth, plus whatever Necrozma is doing, isn't enough to justify Yanmega. Plus, I have a feeling Steve kinda knows what Yanmega is doing, and as much as I'd like to switch things up with Yanmega to throw him off, it's not going to happen this week. But that's okay, because despite taking probably the least amount of time to prep for Steve as I ever have, I think the matchup overall looks pretty good, so we're kind of hoping my first or second looks at the matchup are good enough to catch him off guard. To that end, welcome back to offensive Shukaberry Empoleon. Yeah, I know, but Empoleon looks poised to make some noise this matchup yet again, this time with us prioritizing Stealth Rock, using Surf and Grass Knot as the offensive moves to hit everything but like Terra Grass or Dragon Necrozma, and Roost for longevity against Petrarunt specifically. This new looks are, of course, prioritizing hazards against Steve, which would make sense for Chien-Pao and Iron Moth especially, but the chip just looks overall awesome and could be unexpected. Grass Knot is also pretty new here, specifically to help me 1v1 Blastoise, especially if it lacks R-Sphere coverage for me. That special attack combined with Roost helps me 1v1 Petrarunt, who can't poison me or parting shot out either, so that's pretty great, and we've got the Shuka to help us against Landorus in particular in a pinch. Hopefully if we need that, we can then Roost up later on something else. Would have loved to fit Haze or Roar into this set specifically for Necrozma, but I think these moves are all necessary, and we have a couple of options for Necrozma anyway, so long as it hasn't set up too much. Moving along to Empoleon's usual partner in crimes, we're looking at Iron Hands, looking pretty nice here overall with its tankiness, barely surviving a Lando Jolly EQ in a pinch, but with an Assault Vest, we're really hoping to take on Iron Moth, Blastoise, Electros, Special Necrozma in particular, but if we're healthy enough, we can also take on Chien-Pao as well. CC is very spammable against all but Petrarunt, which EQ hits, and Ice Punch catches Lando, and that would be amazing. But the real move I plan on clicking here most often is Volt Switch. I've lamented in the not-so-distant past how difficult it's been to fit Volt Switch on my Electric type, a move I value very highly, but this week I think we finally made it. Lando can switch in, yes, but should be fearing Ice Punch, especially with Shuka as a real possibility, and especially with Petrarunt right there as a great alternative alongside potentially Electros. That sounds like Volt Switch City to me, especially on Petrarunt to go into my special attackers that can definitely take advantage of the physically bulky Ghost Poison type. Mons such as this Soldew Latios, which once Chien-Pao goes down could kinda just win if we play our cards right. Draco is relatively spammable with no apparent resist, aside from say Terra Fairy or Steel Necrozma, but it's still tough to allow in Chien-Pao after the special attack drop, but hopefully Dragon Pulse is the helpful answer here to keep up that pressure, alongside Luster Purge as also spammable aside from the same two targets. I had Calm Mind on here originally to break through some mons once Chien-Pao goes down, but going down early seemed rather unlikely, so I'd like to be able to threaten with Latios while being able to keep up the momentum with Flip Turn instead, which is already pretty solid damage into something like Iron Moth or even the Landorus if they're chipped down already. And what do we flip turn into if we're going back and forth so much? How about into our new additions? We're going to be starting off with the Typhlosion-Hisui back for another week, this time with the more traditional Choice Scarf to outspeed Chien-Pao minus Sucker Punch. Eruption Calcs go burr. Even if Iron Moth and AV Eel take less than half, I'll take the chip, especially early, and especially if I can scout out an item or two. Fire Blast for more consistent damage after I get hit. Shadow Ball is even more consistent damage, especially without Chien-Pao coming in. And Stopping Tantrum is the neat tech specifically for Iron Moth, which should KO it most of the time after rocks. Neatmon, surprised it's come 2 out of 2 weeks after I struggled bringing Miss Magius, so I think this is actually a pretty good sign. Another good sign is my penultimate mon to bring, as I've got a second Choice Scarf this week in the form of Rotom-Mow, rocking the Terra Fairy and Terra Blast to try and outspeed and blast Chien-Pao. T-Bolt is consistently excellent damage against not Landorus, which should be taking over half from modest Terra Blast anyways. Volt Switch keeps up that momentum train because I don't need Leaf Storm for the poor coverage, plus what I said earlier about Draco. We've got Trick in the last slot. This could be great to swap into a setup Necrozma or a bulky Petrion with a healthy Empoleon in the back, or heck, I could slap it on Chien-Pao to make it more easily answerable. Speaking of, Terra Fairy does help a bit with Chien-Pao too, not resisting ice of course, but we should live banded Ice Spinner while Terra'd, and unlike Appleton we have an offensive pressure we could potentially catch it by surprise with, so Rotom has a nice role here in the matchup. And finally, something about me facing these brothers I don't know. Against his brother Joey of the Akron Agrons in the Season 13 playoffs, I brought 4 Choice Scarfs. I guess Latios could have completed the quartet, but instead we'll have to settle for Cinderace being the 3rd Scarfer. Yeah, pretty happy with this, beating other Scarfs, and Chien-Pao especially. This kind of harkens back to me using Scarf Slitherwing to try and beat Chien-Pao back in Season 12 when I already had priority to beat it. Why do that when I can just U-turn out on it and do 84 to 99 anyways? One round of rocks does it, or one last little bit does it anyways, which lets me pivot around quite well too. The rest is self-explanatory. Zen Headbutt is nice, of course, for Iron Moth and Petrion. Pyro Ball is still very spammable aside from like Blastoise, and Gunk Shot is surprisingly spammable with Petrion out of the picture, especially as coverage to hit a possible Terra Fairy option from Necrozma. That's the team. It's very weak to rocks, so my plan is to lead Cinderace, U-turn out on a hazard setting Landorus or Necrozma, anticipating that Steve won't click EQ, knowing that I wouldn't just risk my Cinder like that, and go right into Typhlosion ahead of rocks chipping me down and getting to click Eruption on something, which should be something walled by Empoleon, meaning we can at least match those rocks relatively early and easily while getting a lots of chip early too. Hoping this works out. Again, I didn't take as much time to prep as I usually do, especially for someone as good as Steve, so I feel a little iffy like I've left something out, so let's find out what I missed in the match itself. As expected, my heart was right instead of my brain as Petrion came over Electros, and the Terra type on Necrozma is Fairy. That's definitely scary and could be quite threatening depending on its set that I would love to find out as soon as possible. We have an early game plan, punish rocks, get up our own, so let's get to it with Cinderace. Good luck, have fun to our buddy Steve. It's the Iron Moth lead. That's kind of cute. No booster energy is interesting. Could be a Scarf, but our Scarf Cinderace does outspeed that thanks to max speed needed for a potential Adamant Scarf Chien-Pao, which I do outspeed by 1 point. Very funny. It could also be a dedicated Focus Sash lead, something I've needed to account for ever since Michael did that to me. Multiple times, actually, now that I think of it. If it is Sash, what's the fear? It should be KOing me in one hit, even if I change types, but maybe Toxic Spikes would be absolutely a worst-case scenario. A nightmare for me aside from the Levitators and Empoleon. Geez, I went from a team that was excellent against T-Spikes to one this susceptible and without bringing Appleton either. So, to take advantage of that, Zen Headbutt probably seems to be the play, though I am still, of course, worried about Chien-Pao coming in to take advantage of it. Petrion, super effective damage. Still takes less than half in the Rocky Helmet reveal. That makes a lot of sense to me. However, if we have already forced in Petrion, I think I have an idea on how to punish that. From one starter to another into Empoleon on the recover, and now we should be able to get up rocks, punishing Blastoise, Toothgrass. Not if it wants to spin. Nightshade is the neutral option from Steve. That does make some sense. It's about the only way to hit Bisharp. Bypasses Eviolite and the Dark typing, but I'll take my rocks. Thank you very much. I think it's about time to damage check. Nightshade hits us again, and Surf is doing very respectable damage. That'll show him our investment, and then we both will just take the opportunity to heal up, which just makes some sense there. Seems like a net win for me overall, as I do have the rocks in there. So he'll take this opportunity to simply swap into the appropriate check, which will indeed be Blastoise, and it will be taking 11. Huh. More from rocks than from the max special attack Empoleon? Yeah, that's an Assault Vest Blastoise, which makes sense, I suppose, as a AV-Mon over Electros. Better able to tank the Typhlosion hits, for sure, at the very least. Well, I guess he could spin with relative impunity. Psych, we've got the Grass Knot just for this. So if he wants to spin, it looks like we can get them back up on Petrarch later. And with all our pivoting, we should find that opportunity. Let's try and get off the surprise Grass Knot for what looks like a pretty good damage, at least. That's going to stick too. Flip turn. Trying to catch a spin block, potentially. I see you, Steve. And back into Petrarch to slurp up the grass move and get some Helmet Chip. Very cool. But that crit and Helmet Chip have me a little bit worried, not doing anything this turn anyway, so I'm just going to roost off the damage, plus the possible Nightshade that we does just go back out into Blastoise, taking some more damage from those rocks, by the by. Okay, he saw us stay in and try and Grass Knot, and how that's a losing cycle for him, so I think he's going to try and remove the rocks this time with Rapid Spin. This is kind of risky, but I really don't see him clicking in other water moves, and Empoleon continues to just make progress. I'm going to go for an aggressive spin block, and if Typhlosion needs to be sacked, it gets sacked. So we're going to go into it to try and block that. Yep, we see the AV, and yes, the aggressive play does pay off here. No spin for you. Now, why did we do that? Don't you see the poor position we're in here now? Well, that is true, but in true competitive Pokemon fashion, we're just going to try and condition our opponent so we can double switch around out into Typhlo and now out into Rotom in the anticipated water move while threatening out Blastoise in this case of Surf. Yep, and there's Flip Turn out into his answer in the form of Chien-Pao, and as we see as the turn flips over, this is very interesting. So first, Blastoise taking another 12% later is great, is really nice actually. Second, no Iron Moth is the revenge option. The poison move looks very free here aside from, I suppose, Empoleon, which would be risky. Maybe locked into a move there? Could be Scarf or Specs, we'll see. And finally, Chien-Pao is the answer, and not only the answer, but the 100% healthy answer, as there is no chip damage from rocks going on there. That is a pair of heavy-duty boots on the Snow Leopard, and an important question on our mind now. Do we just go for it? The Terra Blast fairy option is right there. No matter what, we've got to Terra and attack, right? I don't want it to set up or anything, but it would also suck to be caught in an easily laid trap from him as well. One switch into Iron Moth and suddenly we're in trouble. But can we let this opportunity slip through our fingers? Looks to me as though I need to get this out of the way, because as soon as the plan around Chien-Pao is exposed, we can then discover what the role is for Latios this match too. Maybe the plan is revolving too much around the rocks too. What if it's boots on Iron Moth too? But then why prioritize the Rapid Spin on Blastoise? I think even if Iron Moth comes in, it'll take rocks, and maybe we could just keep forcing it in to take chip. Or maybe I can just Terra Blast and Steve stays in and lets Chien-Pao go down from full, which is absolutely huge. Chien-Pao going down early, that means Latios is opened up tremendously. Just need to look out for Scarfs and the Terra Fairy on Necrozma, plus Empoleon has much less to fear. Typhlosion, now that was huge, even as Iron Moth is obviously going to come in to try and claim something. No boots, by the way, which is also excellent. Okay, so I obviously can't be staying in, but go into what? Empoleon makes sense for an obvious Sludge Wave incoming, but Empoleon is very important for the rest of the match. Definitely is. Iron Hands could tank anything that's incoming, but that seems like a better Revenger, I think, than anything else, and could be susceptible to a more limited role than it needs to have, and I especially don't want it to stay in too early to allow Blastoise to get me in a pickle where it can get off a spin. Latios can tank a hit, but I'd also like that to stay healthy and not risk taking 2 hits in a row to a Speed Tie or Scarf. Then really with AV Blastoise here, I think the Mon that can tank anything and do something back reasonable. While getting valuable information would be the Typhlosion. Sorry about Eruption. Yep, it's Choice Specs and Overheat. Wide right. That's brutal. And is that the first move missed against the Bouffalant all season? It is. Play Rough, Hurricane, Mega Horn, multiple Focus Blast, multiple Draco Meteors, and finally we get one. I'd like to thank the Academy. Moving along, we're at full health. So how do we take advantage? Boy, would Stomping Tantrum be funny, but it doesn't actually guarantee a KO. Didn't realize, for some reason at the time, could have just gotten EQ on there. Whoops, that would have been very funny. Though with him being low and us with a Scarf, it may behoove him to sack, or just go into Landorus after he sees us outspeed. And if he just switch out anyways, maybe we could just hit him as hard as we can. That isn't necessarily with Eruption either, especially if he stays in and overheats again, but probably with the Shadow Ball that should neutrally hit everything, even chunking the Blastoise well enough. So we're going to just Shadow Ball away. That should neutrally hit everything. Yep, it does almost half, which means you can actually swap in and out one more time, unfortunately. And overheat, sheesh, 62, yeah. Well, he knows we're Scarfed on this too, and he probably has an answer now, as of course what is going to come in is the Blastoise. Taking more rocks chip this time. 13% this time, and the Shadow Ball doing a solid 20 back. A pretty good roll, I think. And now, do I risk staying in to get off another attack, and most importantly, deny him Rapid Spin for the rest of the game unless he survives another round of rocks, plus gets in on Iron Hands? Or do I switch out, anticipating that, saving the Typhlosion for later to help with Petrarch and Necrozma? Still don't know anything about the Necro. I don't want to give him any chance to get the jump on me. I'm just going to stay in, and if he surfs, I can easily force him out. Otherwise, we may just live and get another hit off. We'll stay in. More good damage, down to 13. Should keep him out of Rock's range, and flip turn does mean we go down. It's 5-5, but we get some more very good information. The neutral pick here for Steve is Necrozma, and even better than that, it's leftovers in Necrozma. Very interesting. That really doesn't guide me to a particular set, honestly. Even setup wouldn't mind the passive recovery. But there isn't anything particularly cheeky or weird, at least so far. Weakness policy, which he's brought several times against me. No berries, choice item, just lefties. And as I started to guide my thoughts about what to do, I came to kind of a cool idea. No Empoleon, it's needed for basically everything else. No hands because the Psychic move is easy. No Latios as I needed the Terra procced first. Cinder, of course, could come in. U-turn is relatively free as it could pivot me into probably Latios on the Petrarch and force more Rocks chip. But keeping that in the back for, say, a Scarf Lando is nice. Or a +1 Necro. Instead, how about we just go out into Rotom? Being locked in isn't that great against the combo of Lando and Petrarch, and instead, if I'm so worried about a setup Necro, what if I instead tricked him, give them the Scarf on Moonlight? That is so incredibly huge. I cannot describe what that does for the outlook of the rest of the game. It feels like Rotom and Rocks are carrying right now. That means he's probably going to need to swap out and around. So let's go for the most free attack we've had all game in Terra Blast, now going straight into the Landorus, and that's going to do, as we already know, over half. Rotom is putting in the finest of work here. Now, what is Lando looking to do here? I would love to grab a KO here, but what if it's the Sludge Wave? Rotom could have use against a bulky Petrarch, or potentially Necrozma being locked into a move like EQ, so it would be nice to preserve its HP. Instead, it's not clicking EQ this turn. I think Iron Hands' health isn't looking all that valuable right now, but with things like the Psychic or Fairy type and the Ghost type being the healthy ones, and the Fire type, of course, that I would love to be able to wall, already pretty low, so I think I'm going to head out into that now. Well, if there's a way back into the game for Steve, that could be it. As the U-turn from Lando, revealing physical investment, means he can go into Blastoise to spin, or, like before, could take 13% from Rocks and just go down 5-4. We catch a big break there, as Blastoise probably had like exactly 45 HP left from the 3 rounds of Rocks prior and 3 other hits too. No spin for you. More chip damage for Chien-Pao after that KO, and into, of course, the Iron Moth for Steve. Makes enough sense, I suppose. Looking for a KO before going down. However, as I already admitted, my HP on Iron Hands isn't all that valuable anymore, and I have an Assault Vest on that I'm currently donning, so that Overheat is going to be chewed up, and Volt Switch will get me the reliable KO as we go up to 5-3, and we go into Cinderace as the overall safe play, except for Petrarch, who I guess could still have Nasty Plot on its set, but instead, we get to see Landorus. Oh man, is this how we get to break Steve's spirit? Do all 3 Choice Scarfs get to have positive uses this week? Steve brought this in hoping to get the jump on us, meaning he's probably Choice Scarfed himself, but a single Pyro Ball can and will crush his spirits from here, so let's go. I could U-turn to ensure I miss. I don't miss there, but that wouldn't KO. Even if it would mean he'd get KO'd on his next switch into Rocks, but screw that. The safer play is still probably to Pyro Ball, so I don't need to guess which moves he's locked into, or even if he's just bluffing the Scarf. I mean, what are the odds of a miss? You already know, 90% my booty. But the one cursing with Steve is he asked me if I quote, brought 4 effing Choice Scarfs again, which I had no choice but to vehemently deny any knowledge of. Very funny. Would have been even funnier to me if that had worked. Well, either way, we're anticipating this to be choice locked, or at the very least physical, and if that's the case, probably nothing for the Terra Fairy Rotom. So let's get into it. Claim some damage with a T-Bolt. Petrarch in, and here's some potential karma here with a crit, but he does live on 3%. Nothing to do really but to finish it off. I don't want it to heal up, so let's do it. Oh shoot, that's a lot more speed than I thought it'd have. Okay, Rotom hangs on, does not get poisoned, thus does not get confused, so it does get to claim another KO, doing well north of 200% this match. Swapping into the hands to try and, I don't know, bait something, I guess. Steve lamented over the past few turns, but especially here, I figure I just have to keep my ground immunities up and anticipate that I have the bulk between Chien-Pao and Latios to survive whatever he has planned for me as Necrozma comes out, knowing he can't lock into EQ with Lando yet as his win con. Well, I'm slower than Necro for sure right now, so I guess the only thing to do is just to Volt Switch, find out whatever he's got, and just go for it. He could swap out into Lando, but that would be his last switch in, so I don't think he's doing that. I thought about Ice Punch for that purpose, but I guess I'll Volt Switch. Sure, let's find out what he's locking himself into. Oh, Gravity, that's one of the sets ever for sure, but it also means I just need to ensure Lando doesn't get to click EQ a few times with Gravity up and I'm good. To that end, Empoleon in to just click Surf, and it will do so to get the KO on Lando, as it's just Necrozma against the world. Maybe I threw a potential differential point here by going into Rotom, but I wanted to be a little safe. Earth Power does come out and KO Rotom, but after that, Empoleon will just come back in. It gets to eat a hit easily with the Shuka Berry. We're going to roost a couple of times here on the last 2 Earth Powers with Gravity up. And then, of course, it's just going to be going out into the Latios to clean up the game with a couple of Luster Purges. GG to Steve, crazy game, but as I said, the Rotom and playing around the Stealth Rocks were absolutely critical. Seeing Steve's plan laid out was huge. Damage revealing Helmet and Assault Vest, Frisk getting the specs, Rocks revealing Boots and Lefties, the Scarf trick down to Necrozma, and the aggressive play with Lando revealing the Scarf there. Knowledge was power here for sure, and maybe my play has turned around as I felt pretty good yet again about the way I went about this game overall. From the early Rocks to the aggressive plays to keep them up, to the Rotom taking advantage of its Scarf against Chien-Pao and Necrozma. Great play all around, and good plays from Steve too. Just felt like we were one step ahead for most of the game, which was pretty satisfying. That's going to bring our record up to 4-2 with a +10 differential, normally locking us into playoffs, but at least saving us from a losing record. Yet again, the playoffs this season look crazy to get into without too many upsets wins from the very bottom, but lots coming from the middle of the pack. We've got about 12 or 13 coaches with realistic shots of getting to 5-3, and that in addition to the sheer amount of coaches we've got with 18, and only the top 8 plus any ties of record. 4-4 is not safe at all. It's more possible than ever that the number 8 seed could grab a 5-3 record, and if that's the case, 4-4 would not be good enough, and we need to grab a win in one of our final 2 matches this season. Easier said than done though, as although we've done well so far in the second half, I've made it clear just how brutal this final stretch is. That'll do it for me for week 6. Next time we've got a fellow 4-2 team. It's our first time facing off against the Corviknight Clobberers, who are looking to stop a 2-game losing streak themselves, but only one of us can get that 5th win next time to clinch playoffs. We'll find out next time. I'll see you there.